So the lovely Nancy is moderating today, moderating this panel. And Nancy is a reporter for CNBC, so it's kind of fun to turn the page on you. I get to interview the interviewer for once, right?
Yeah,
so
sure it's fun for me. But
a few really cool facts about Nancy. She's from Detroit.
that's right.
And apparently you can swim to Canada. Is that true?
That is true. Never tried it myself. We go over the bridge.
You go over the bridge. And why did you go over the bridge? Tell everyone.
Well, as you know, having lived in Canada yourself, the drinking age is 19. So when we come back from university the first year, there's this mass exodus from Detroit to Windsor.
Yeah, and all the Canadians on the border make a bit of fun of the Americans because
it goes both ways.
They can't hold it. Absolutely. And you've been at CNBC for about 3 years this time around.
Yes.
You came to LSE, which brings you to London. And Nancy's quite the superstar. She has to wake up at 2:30 every morning to do the 5 to 6 a.m. show with Singapore. So tell us about your Singapore show.
It's a global financial markets program, and it covers both financial markets, the corporate world, everything really, from tech, public markets, and then economics as well. But its idea is it's midday for Asian markets, opening show for Europe, and a big kickoff for the US trading day, if you will, some people who are still going to bed in the West Coast.
And then the last interesting fact, she's also the reporter on the automotive sector. So I'm kind of saying maybe Nancy should replace Clarkson, right? You're the petrol head. So do you have any cool petrol head facts for us?
Well, this is one I heard I had to look up to make sure it was true. But supposedly, I know there's a lot of pride around Formula One here. We like to stick to the Indy cars. But supposedly, McLaren, a few years back, they needed to test a gearbox for F1 prototype, and they actually used a Chevy V8 engine, which is a source of pride for me coming from Detroit. So.
There we go. I think she should replace Clarkson. What do you guys think?
I'll stick to the financials of the autos.
Okay, and with that, we'll call up the corporate venture panel. Sure. Over to you.
Thank you. If everyone wants to come up, we will get started. And I think this is a particularly interesting topic given the theme of the conference, of course, connecting disruptors with corporates. So on the one hand, you have corporations looking outside, taking a note of the startups, entrepreneurs, but a big uptick in some of the venture we've seen just from within the corporates. So in order to kick off here, I think we've been given about 30 minutes left. So I just want to do a really brief introduction because when we talk about corporate venture, of course, it's a very broad area, a lot of companies involved. So if everyone can just give a 30-second intro of who you are, what your background, and exactly what you do in your role.
Hi, I'm Jan Harley. I'm one of the directors at Unilever Ventures. We're the corporate venture arm of Unilever. Unilever probably doesn't need that much introduction, one of the biggest consumer goods companies in the world. Famous brands like Dove and Magnum. But we set up Unilever Ventures in 2002, and we invest in early stage businesses on behalf of Unilever Captive Fund. We've invested about 500 million euros since 2002, and our focus is really in two areas. One is digital, and the other is personal care.
Patrick Meisberger, Managing Director of Commerz Ventures, which is the corporate venture capital unit of Commerzbank, the second largest bank in Germany. Of course, as we have a limited partner, which is a bank, we are focusing on fintech investments all over Europe, Israel, as well as in the US. We have just started 1st of October last year, already have 4 and the 5th company being on the way in our portfolio, and happy to spend more in the most relevant, interesting companies here across the industry.
Good morning, my name is Leo Castellanos. I'm an investment director at Saatchi Invest. Saatchi Invest is the venture capital arm of global agency M&C Saatchi. We invest in early stage deal flow tech companies from seed stage to Series A. We've been running it for the last 3 years and believe in investing in very simple ideas, the brutal simplicity of thought. That's our mantra.
Hi. My name is Maurizio. I'm from Italy. I'm founder of H-Farm. We are based in the outskirts of Venice. It's a pretty unique campus, founded 10 years ago, and just 2 weeks ago we went public. And what we do, basically, it's about innovation. We do investment. We have about 100 startups in our portfolio, and we help corporates to glue with the startup mindset, with the digital culture. And we invest a lot in the education. That's what we do.
Hello, my name is Guy Horowitz. I'm with DTCP, stands for Deutsche Telekom Capital Partners. As the name might suggest, we're the venture arm or the newly founded venture fund backed by Deutsche Telekom. We started our operation earlier this year, already made 5 investments, overall something like 500 million euros under management. We have partners in 3 locations, 3 countries. Myself, I'm based out of Tel Aviv, Israel. We have a partner in Silicon Valley, and of course, main office in Hamburg, Germany.
Okay, fantastic. So as you can see, several different sectors here working across the world, not just in any one specific region. And I think just to get the conversation started, I want to get some insights here on what do you think has really been driving the uptake, the increase in supply that we've seen in venture capital? And is it more of a reactionary response, feeling perhaps under threat from all the disruption, the success of entrepreneurs, or is this really corporates waking up and saying this is a long-term strategic play where we can really gain from this? If you would like to start.
Okay.
Jan.
Thanks, Nancy. I think there are 2 things that are really going on. The world is really changing massively, driven by 2 trends. One is kind of the open economy, and it's no longer good enough to do R&D by looking inwards and having 5 smart scientists in your R&D lab. You need to partner and you need to work with people all around the world, and investing is one way of doing that in a really great way. The other trend that's kind of obvious that's all around us, but just having a profound effect on everybody around the world is, this little thing that we all talk about, but billions of people's lives are being transformed. And as a consumer goods companies, the traditional behaviors of our customers are changing massively all around the world, in the way you communicate with them, in what they do, in what they buy. And companies like Unilever aren't able internally to kind of handle that. And corporate venturing is a great way for those companies to really get out there and engage in technology driven by that.
Sure, if I can just jump in there. When you talk about the R&D perhaps not being sufficient when it comes to innovation, do you see resources being diverted away from R&D and into the corporate venture arms, or is it not a zero-sum game? Is it really just more of a complement for the R&D departments?
Yeah, I think it's a complement. I mean, I think there's a long-term trend in moving money, but it's not really a competition. I think R&D is also embracing it and partnering with external funds in a different way as well.
Okay, Patrick.
You asked a very important question, is are corporates following a long-term strategy with entering the venture capital business? I would say, I hope so. Because venture capital per se is a very long-term business. You invest today, then you manage and support your portfolio company for another 4 to 7 years on average, and then hopefully seek an exit. So this is very long-term. And if corporates are, let's say, too short-sighted, hopping on an opportunity because everybody else is doing it, they run into the danger that the party is over after 2-3 years and the first bad investments being written off the balance sheet. Yeah. So
and I
it's
suppose
important to be long-term perspective.
Important to be long-term, but one thing threatening to bring that party to an end, of course, is the uptick in valuations we've seen. And I'm wondering, do you think the corporate venture capitalists, do they really have the appetite to stay in this game as valuations continue to move higher? Because it's not just the venture capitalists you're competing with anymore. It's other investors, specifically when we come into the higher stages. Is that?
There is a trend which is very concerning that we see, especially the late-stage valuations being sky-rising like crazy, mostly driven actually by non-VCs, and not necessarily from corporate VCs. Most of them are actually pretty smart. It's more the mutual funds, hedge funds, buyout funds, which are entering late-stage investment opportunities, and then some corporates, not necessarily the VC units. And that is, of course, concerning because they do have a different rationale. Mutual funds want to stock up on shares before they are actually public listed because afterwards they have to buy them anyways. Yeah? So it's a different rationale, whilst the corporate VC has to be really, really careful not to overprice his investments, because then in the end, after 2-3 years, it will backfire on him if he doesn't provide the financial return. The CFO will get nervous.
And Leo, can you talk a bit to, from your perspective at Saatchi, what you're looking for in terms of you're getting into early stage as well, is that correct?
Yeah, absolutely. So we are, unlike some of the other guys in the panel, we we are looking for simple ideas that change the world. And it sounds like a cliche, but that's exactly how we go about the businesses that we buy into. We're obviously in for the long run. It doesn't necessarily have to, we don't really need to see a straight strategic alignment to bring competitive advantage to the agency in the future. So we have to be content that it will be a financial return, and also we invest in things that we understand. So you would not see such invest buying into clean tech or health. Obviously, we like comms, marketing, branding, advertising, and that's the kind of thing that we are getting into. It doesn't necessarily need to be something that goes out to market as this is a branding or an advertising piece of technology, but it knows how to address consumers and users, and that's the key thing for us. Products and businesses that get a problem, bring a solution in a really simple way.
And you hit on something really interesting, which is you won't invest in something you don't understand. And I think several of the panelists can really comment on that as well. And you want to rely on the expertise that your corporate parent company provides. However, I have to wonder, is that really getting at the problem of when you invest in someone, the entrepreneur, for instance, they're looking for someone to invest who thinks outside of their sector, maybe. And that's the benefit that a traditional venture capitalist could provide, whereas they may think they're part of Unilever, they're part of the old Commerce Bank, they're part of an established bank. So how do you continue to create that culture of innovation and thinking outside the traditional ways that the sector may think?
Definitely. One of the things that I'd say everybody says, and it's the big difference between whether you do it or not, is opening the contacts book and opening doors for the different businesses in companies and places where it really makes a difference. Whether it's to bring a product to market or to get that specific strategic partnership that's going to create value for the businesses in the medium to long run.
And Maurizio, I have to wonder if this is where H-Farm comes in, because you, in some ways, take the corporates and give them a platform to encourage, whether it's an accelerator or some sort of startup thinking. If you can walk us through that, and do you think that provides a service because then you are bringing a new culture of innovation by them looking outside as well?
Yeah, you're right. It's an interesting because we started as an incubator, and all the knowledge we developed was bootstrapping startup and gathering entrepreneurs and a new generation of young entrepreneurs. And that's what we did over 8 years. By the past 2 years, we started to involve corporates through hackathons and a number of activities to let them understanding how different is the approach by a new generation of entrepreneurs with the technology. So how different is the mindset to solve the problems, to innovate with the new technologies. And most of corporates are low-tech culture. And the new technologies, the new generation, they are native inside a high-tech culture. It is going to be really challenging for corporates to understand and to find a way to deal with. So we started a number of activities and also some services to deliver to help in creating a kind of bridge. And right now we have a number of, let's say, service, but basically corporates, they leverage our platform in the same way how investors, VCs, do with the startups. Just exactly the same way. So they are able to access to a deal flow, to recruit new talents, and to see hackers or young entrepreneurs solving their problems through different ways compared with internal management. And that's what's happening.
And when you look at the increase in client demand for your business over the last few years, does it stick out to you any one sector or a few sectors perhaps that have a higher demand for innovation, willing to look inside and innovate?
You mean what sector?
And the companies that come to you across sectors, is there one that stands out in terms of?
Yeah, it's kind of cross sector.
Okay.
Because it's especially the digital mindset, which is cross on any kind of a technology. We do not develop the technology internally. We rather use technology, existing technologies. can use technology from Israel. But what we do, it's kind of comfort zone. You find the tangible, what is not tangible with the innovation. So it's kind of cross. We have corporates that ranging from mechanics or consumer products. If they come there to change their process or their business model.
Okay, and Guy, I'm just wondering if you can pick up here in terms of when we talk about the corporate venture units of larger corporates, to what extent are they siloed, and do you think there's a need to kind of bring the two sides together, or is it better off maintaining its independence, both structurally and then financially as well?
Well, for one, we are in the process of reassessing the way we work within and with the corporate called Deutsche Telekom, and the fund being an independent fund with a single LP. I think that's a structure that you'll see becoming more and more common. So a corporate would put money into a venture capital company, but expecting it to be independent. We've seen and we are seeing corporates that are looking at investment in ventures, in startups, as part of the open innovation strategy of the corporate. And that's risky. Saying one of the ways that we're going to interact with the ecosystem is through investment means that as a corporate, you're expecting certain values to be driven your way just by virtue of putting your money into companies. And as Patrick was commenting, venture capital is a serious business. It has to be done professionally and has to be done according to the rules of the game. And in venture capital, the main rule is make money. And if you have an alignment of interest between the people who are making the investment and, of course, the entrepreneurs, the startups that are getting the money, and the corporate who understands that the main reason and the main goal here is to be financially successful, and that will drive innovation, it will drive collaboration, I think everyone is on the same page. Things may get a bit tricky when the corporate doesn't have a single strategy or they're confused about the strategy. Different executives have different ideas for why are we doing this and how are we doing it. And one way to evade such confusion or prevent such confusion is to set up a corporate fund, which is its own thing and doesn't abide by the corporate rules.
Can I just,
Sure, yeah, please.
comment on that? I mean, I think what we've learned at Unilever Ventures is it's crucial that we're financially motivated. So I'm motivated by the long-term success of our fund. That's how I make my money going forwards. But it's also really important, and it's something that distinguishes corporate venture from financial investors, is that I also have to deliver some strategic return. And the problem we've got is that the executives who are running Unilever at the moment have a certain view about what strategic return looks like. Actually, when we come to exit our businesses in 5 or 7 years' time, the one thing I'm certain of is they'll be gone. And so we have to make some kind of assessment about what long-term strategic return is. But I think from our perspective, for us to survive, we need to deliver a financial return, and we need to deliver a strategic return, which is slightly different from the rest of the venture capital community.
I have a question. Are you actually seeing your venture capital vehicle as a kind of extended M&A vehicle? So do your companies exit into Unilever?
Not really. I mean, I think the majority, so my investments are in the digital sector. We invest in marketing technologies, and we invest in technology companies that can really work with Unilever as a customer. Mm-hmm. Actually, in that area, Unilever isn't interested in acquiring those businesses at all. Strategic return in that area is helping Unilever in India grow its market share by 2% in its laundry category. That's a great strategic return. And if I sell that company and make 10 times our money, that's a great financial return. And so what we're trying to do is get both of those things. Mm.
Is there a reluctance then to sell to a competitor, let's say, if you've invested in a company that's true to your field and then you sell it on to a competitor? Is there a sense of territorial aspect there that they don't want to give it on to the competition?
From a financial point of view and my long-term motivation, I'd be delighted to sell a business to Procter & Gamble. I'm absolutely delighted. Quite a few of our companies also work with Procter & Gamble and other competitors as commercial partners. Mm-hmm. I think if it's really strategically close to what Unilever does, if it's an area that Unilever might be interested in, then it might cause some tension. Certainly, we've got built into our fund mechanisms that effectively help insulate that tension between us as financial investments and the rest of Unilever. So I'm on the company side, and trying to sell it for as much money as we can. And we've got people in Unilever on the M&A side who are trying to persuade us, but we'll be driven by the financial argument.
And Patrick, you as well, I mean, focusing almost exclusively on fintech. Is there an appetite, a willingness to sell to other banks when it comes to exiting?
I have the same view as you, Jan. So if Deutsche Bank would come across and wants to buy one of our portfolio companies, be my guest, as long as the price is right, we would do that. But seriously, we are set up as a VC, not as an M&A unit of Commerzbank, and the bank actually has set it up not to have a separate M&A unit, just to have actually a unit which is showing them and introducing them to innovation and to startup companies, which in the end can partner with the bank. It's not about taking it and integrating it and killing it. It's really about a collaborative path we want to take. So in that regard, there are no conflicts. At least we haven't seen any yet.
Now, one thing everyone has in common here who's working on the corporate venture side seems to be that you're working within verticals, within the areas that your company already is established in. Do you foresee a stage when corporate venture gets so large and advanced that they move beyond that? That, for instance, Commerce Ventures, Deutsche Telekom could be getting into other sectors?
Well, no. We would try to stick to the area we know best, which is fintech, financial services industry. We look at the edges like insurance we're looking a lot of enabling technologies. But in the end, we get all the money from Commerzbank. And as a consequence, we stick to what they want to have in the end.
Okay.
Of course, always following the rules of venture capital business, but focusing topic-wise into the industry we know best.
Okay. Do you want to jump in here?
So for Deutsche Telekom, for example, in a way, everything we see in this new mobile economy is relevant, right? To an extent, the old school kinds of investments, the heavy capital equipment, gear for telcos is probably the least interesting from a return standpoint or from the investment cycle. And we see a lot of stuff happening both on the consumer world and on the enterprise world, which we find extremely relevant to the corporate that gave us the money to invest, but is not directly related, or you would not call telecom 10 years ago, right? Data center technology, virtualization, new platforms such as virtual reality. That's really our business, on the enablement side and on the delivery side. A few years ago, if you'd ask, is that telecom? People would probably say no. I think now that the boundaries are diminishing, basically, for that.
Okay. And Leo, is that?
I think it comes down also to the way you position the question at the beginning, which is it also reactionary? And I think, in a way, it has to be, but when addressing the lessons of the past by dominant global markets, dominant global brands that have disappeared because they did not keep up with the technology. I mean, 10 years ago, we all had BlackBerries in our hands. I mean, probably you'll find one person in the room, if any, with a BlackBerry today. And it's in a very simple way, just putting out there that yes, there has to be a financial return. Yes, there has to be some strategic alignment. And yes, it's venture capital. So it's the riskiest way of investing, but you're investing into the future, ideally, with the view to mitigating that risk of becoming obsolete and having the threat of not being relevant anymore.
And just sticking to that, when you make the reactionary point, perhaps corporate venture has been a bit late to the game. How is that viewed from the startups, the entrepreneur's perspective, when you're pitching to them, let's say, to make an investment, as opposed to the traditional VC players? Do you think there's a sense of reluctance from the startups, from the entrepreneurs, to accept the funding from corporates? Guy, looks like you have.
Well, I mean, it's a geographical thing. In Israel, for example, getting money from what people perceive as a strategic investor from a corporate is typically considered a great thing. And again, we're playing with that a little bit because, as I said, we're there to make money, but people consider, they see the magenta T and they assume that's good for their business. In some other places, corporate signifies a slow-moving creature, decision-making that's rather obscure, not always clear. So I would say that we still have an issue in the US, for example, to explain and to pitch the value of the corporate. I think in Europe what you see is actually corporate investors and corporate venture firms being more active, or at least as active as professional VCs, financial VCs. And that's a European phenomenon. In Israel, I'm happy to say that we're still considered a great news for a startup.
Do you think that resonates with your experience?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think corporate venturing is kind of newer than venture capital, and I think a lot of people in the early days did it badly, and that gave corporate venturing a bad reputation. It was effectively corporate strategy arms going out for a couple of years, trying to pinch what they could for their organization and not really playing by the rules of the game. I think now we tend to work alongside a lot of the big venture capital firms, and our reputation is based on actually adding value and helping the companies and creating things that really support the companies. And I think we're slowly, as a group of corporate venturing, building up that reputation as a great added value. And I'm delighted when our partners recommend us and say, hey, these guys could really help in that area, because that's our experience. And I think we've probably got to the tipping point where we're now well respected on the table with other financial investors.
And Maurizio, I want to get your opinion on this, since you're sitting outside the corporate venture within a corporate, working across different corporations here. Do you think that's a fair assessment, that reputation is going away a bit, that corporates are too slow when it comes to innovation and disruption?
Yeah, my personal opinion, it's by the experience I have with corporates, is they are not yet leveraging the power of the corporate ventures, because they're still investing. If you're going to see how much money they put in the R&D and versus the venture, still they are not in the way to really understanding and acting toward innovation, because they still say, okay, let's go to see, but they should more seriously put serious money into the venture. And then, as you mentioned, it depends, it's changing. Europe corporates as a culture, as a mindset. In the United States is different, Israel is different. So geographically and also according to the industry they belong, there's a tremendous influence. But in my opinion, it's something that can help the corporate to really look forward, but they should work more and changing more the attitude. I've been speaking with some head of investments, in especially automotive, but board members and executives still too old school. They have the corporate ventures, they do these things, but if you should take the money you have in the R&D and going more into the venture. So that's the way you can really start innovating the company. And I think it's still ahead.
So that seems to make a case for perhaps not keeping the corporate venture side so separate, and perhaps bringing it more together with the corporate side as well.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, we only have a few minutes left, and I would like to leave a few minutes for questions. But just before we go, I think in terms of following the smart money, if you will, if you can conclude with just where you're looking to invest. I appreciate some are very geographically focused, such as Deutsche Telekom, but where you're investing perhaps within your sector, what stage, or specifically what kind of companies. Guy, if you want to kick off.
Right. So we do early stage and later stage investments. We are very open towards, let's call them early revenue companies that can leverage our experience and, of course, our ability to assist. And on the later stage, we do see many more opportunities these days than before. So we're doing both. And geographically, as I said, Israel, US, Europe.
And you did have some stats I just want to get you to mention on the Israel market specifically, getting to the point of whether or not you think valuations there have really hit a peak.
Well, Israel is following the American way. I mean, valuations are going high. I think you mentioned India as being another place where valuations are going crazy. It's happening everywhere. I think corporate investors, as Patrick said before, we have the ability to be more savvy and more picky, but we will be playing along with market conditions, and as unfortunate as it may be, things are not going to be cheap anytime soon.
Okay. And Maurizio, any concluding remarks? And you're not making the investments per se, but on the future of corporate venture, perhaps, where you see it going.
My opinion?
Yeah.
On the future?
You can pass too.
Yeah, I pass. I just say it. It's corporate ventures. It's going to be for the corporate mindset extremely important because all the innovation we got till now, it was thanks to the venture capital. They understood innovation, they understood the new generation, they invested, they took the risk, they had the money to risk into the innovation, and corporates, they have to really understand the tool, the power, the opportunity we have with the corporate venture, but they need really to change their mindset on that. As I said, the future, I think that's what I have to do it.
Okay. Leo?
I have to agree. I think it's here to stay. I think the more threats there are out there for companies to stay relevant, they have to look to mitigate that risk, and corporate venturing is one way to do it. I think it's obviously now is the time where you see, corporate VCs and financial VCs working together. I don't think there will be some sort of consolidation or disappearance of this trend in the next few years. If anything, I see more corporates doing it.
Okay. Patrick?
We do not do late stage. We leave that to the non-VCs to overprice. We're focusing on typical B+ rounds, so mid-stage. Selectively, for example, in German companies or neighboring countries where we are close enough, we would do in good consortiums also A rounds. And seed deals we would not do because we actually do have in Commerzbank also an incubator vehicle. They would take on those opportunities, and they are the better vehicle for entering at that early stage.
Okay.
And so if an opportunity to plug, from my perspective, digital marketing, digital commerce, I look at the world, Unilever's the second largest advertiser on the planet. If I can invest in businesses that can help Unilever, I know that they can not only help Unilever, they can help loads and loads of other companies like that. And so I'm really excited when I see, there's so many new technologies in that area. When I see businesses in that space, I think there's a great future for corporate venturing. I think we'll see it continuing to grow. And I think it's just about understanding how it works related to normal, traditional venture capital players.
Okay, fantastic. Well, on that, we're just out of time. I'm not sure, we don't have time for questions. Okay, but all our panelists will be here, I'm sure, willing to speak to you if you have questions on the sidelines. Well, thank you. Thank you to everyone participating as well.
Thanks, Nancy.